All right, what's up, everybody? It's your man Ant Walker here on the Walkout Network, reacting to UFC Wichita. This is the second edition of the Walk of Shame. So I look a lot better than I did last time. I was a morning after since I was live at UFC 235, and definitely very underrested for that show. But here I am, fresh with my whiskey of choice to keep me company, and pretty happy and excited to talk with everyone about the fights tonight. So I need to pull up the current stream on my phone so that way I can keep up with the questions that come in. If any do. So anyway, all right. So let's talk about what we just saw in the main event. Junior Dos Santos just pulled out a second round TKO finish of Derrick Lewis. That was a crazy fight. I mean, this is one of those things where you don't really want either guy to lose, at least for me. Like, I'm a big fan of Derrick Lewis, big fan of Junior Dos Santos, have a lot of respect for those guys and what they've been able to accomplish. Of course, JDS being the more accomplished guy, the guy with more credentials next to his name. You know, of course, you gotta respect that. You gotta respect him making that walk to the cage. And it is crazy to think of the turnaround he's made in the past couple of years. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where we were really just ready to write him off entirely. Like think about what the losses that he suffered, man. The Overeem loss, man. The second fight to Stipe, of course, the slaughterhouses that he faced against Cain Velasquez, and those two rematches. And now look at this guy, man. He's that close to a title shot again, man. That's crazy. That's really crazy. Stipe doesn't have the belt. Cain doesn't have the belt. So now there is this open road for JDS to sneak his way back in there. And then look at what's going on elsewhere at heavyweight. And like, man, there's actually some pretty exciting matchups that are there for him, man. I see all the calls on Twitter for him versus Francis Ngannou. Yes, please sign me up. That would be an amazing fight if they can put that together. That fight was originally booked right before JDS had his issue with USADA and he got pulled. So I would love to see that matchup, but I really like what I saw from JDS tonight. And quite honestly, I like what I saw from Derrick Lewis a lot, man. I'm waiting on what they say about Derrick Lewis on the post-fight presser. If they say, like, yeah, some sort of injury, or, you know, if he broke his rib in there or something like that. Because, I mean, up until that body shot, and even after the body shot, man, Derrick Lewis was putting in work. He was really putting in work, and he was a lot more technical than a lot of people give him credit for. And I think that's been a constant thing with Derrick Lewis, man. We've seen him improve almost fight to fight. And this was an improved version of Derrick Lewis, who looked slimmer, who looked like he was faster on the feet, looked like he was, he was throwing his hands a little better. Everything about him looked a lot sharper, in my opinion, than normal. But it just wasn't good enough. You know, Junior Dos Santos is still that nice. We still need to recognize Cigano as one of the best dudes out there doing it. That's crazy to see where he came from. So, all right, so let's break it down round by round how that started, man. So the first round, just Derrick Lewis really measuring that pace, and he has been very vocal about his issues with cardio. Apparently, I mean, not sure whether or not this was absolutely true, because, you know, Derrick Lewis does say a lot of crazy things to get people talking and to kind of throw some misinformation or whatever out there to distract people or whatever, or just to entertain himself, whatever the case may be. But he claims that he didn't really work on his technique and stuff a lot, that it was all about his conditioning, all about making sure that his gas tank would last. And I didn't see necessarily a better gas tank. I just saw him, for the most part, using his energy a little more efficiently. The one exception I would say is that he still throws that switch kick a lot. I mean, he was throwing it a lot faster this time, and he was varying it, so it wasn't just to the head. He threw a couple to the body as well. So that was good to mix up the placement. But the fact that he still just throws that just naked, like with no setup, not using the hands first, not doing anything that's going to open up that kick a little more. because after a certain point, it looked like Dos Santos was on to what was going on. He just kept that hand up. He sat there and just kept it up and pretty much did a 3-point contact block every time that thing was thrown up. But he did mix in the right kick, so that was good. But Dos Santos, man, it looked like he cleaned up some of the bad habits that he had before. Like what got him in trouble against Stipe was like his tendency to just back up. He would just back up to the fence and kind of hit that point where his feet were like parallel, and he would lose that staggered stance. And when he lost that staggered stance, that's when you'd see people have success on him. That's when you'd see like Kane be able to come in and get him in the clinch and take him down, or just bully him from there, whatever the case may be. And we saw Stipe land his shots once Dos Santos kind of backed up and lost his footing. But he didn't do that this time, man. He came forward with good footwork. He had Lewis backing up a little bit too, which we don't see a whole lot of. But Junior Dos Santos, man, looked really, really, really sharp tonight. Like really sharp. I'm very, very excited to see what comes next for him. So we did, I talked about the potential Ngannou fight, which would be lovely. I honestly, I wouldn't be mad if you put him in there for a title fight against Cormier, man. Like either way, man, Cormier is looking pretty, man. He's got quite a few guys that I think you can throw in there with him, and there will be no complaints. I think we would all be very happy to see those matchups. Yeah, man, I thought this main event delivered. It was really, I don't know, Black Beast, man, his fights always have this sense of intrigue and anxiety for me watching. It's almost like something is going to happen at all times. You don't know what, but you got to watch, and you got to pay very close attention, because in a moment's notice, something really crazy can happen. And tonight proved that case. I mean, didn't go in his favor, but hey, I'm not mad at it, man. Not mad at it at all. Just hope he gets on track now. So you'll wonder where you're going to match him up, because this is now his second loss in a row. Granted, that first loss was to Daniel Cormier in a late notice title fight. So you can't really drop him down too far. He lost to Daniel Cormier and Junior Dos Santos after what was it, like a 9-fight winning streak or something like that. You can't put him down but too far, man. Honestly, I wouldn't be mad to see him against Ben Rothwell or Ivanov, who we'll talk about in a second as well. So yeah, hats off to both of those guys. Great main event. All right, so next up was Capoeira Dos Santos and Curtis Millender. I definitely dug what I saw in this fight, man. It played out a lot differently than I thought. I mean, with a nickname like Capoeira and with a kickboxer the likes of Curtis Millender, you kind of forget that there is a ground game that can exist. So when I made my pick for Dos Santos to win this fight, I thought it would be based on better striking, not necessarily more technical, but just more variety, and he would be able to sneak in some crazy kick at some wild time, and he moves a lot more unconventionally than Millender, and that sort of thing can throw a guy off. But this came down to the ground game. It didn't take long for Dos Santos to shoot. I think it was like in the first minute and a half, he shot in for that takedown. And you got to love what he was able to do once the fight got to the ground. When Millender forced the scramble, you saw Capoeira just still stick on him like a wet blanket. Like there was that one moment where Millender was kind of pushed him away, and Dos Santos like regrouped for a split second, and he was back at it and just right back on him and set up what ended up being the fight ending sequence. And that was dope. That was pretty dope. So now with him, man, welterweight is looking real crazy. He was ranked number 14 going into the night, according to the UFC rankings. I didn't check the Sherdog rankings. I would imagine that he was a bubble lister for Sherdog, and if he wasn't, then he probably was just right outside of that. Man, this guy is looking good, man. You got to put him up against some quality opposition now. So let me take a look at the current UFC rankings as they stand at this exact moment. Obviously, they have not been updated to reflect tonight's results yet. But so let's see. I wouldn't put him up against Vicente Luque. I think that kind of that kind of kills off a potential name right there. I'd rather see both of those guys kind of built up. You know, Gunnar Nelson, Leon Edwards fighting next week. I like him for the winner of that. Wouldn't be bad at all. If you want to boost him up even higher, why not throw him in against Rafael Dos Anjos? Not mad at that at all, man. Not sure if Damian Maia is booked, but Damian Maia, man, wouldn't be a bad one either with that variety in style, and then Damian Maia being the ultimate one-trick pony. That could be interesting there. But either way, man, either way, welterweight is looking really good, man. To have a guy that talented who is just barely in the top 15, very good things to come, man. And you know, with Woodley now losing the belt to Kamaru Usman, like so much opens up at the top of that division that I think is going to trickle down to the bottom of it. So, you know, we're going to have Anthony Pettis jumping up to welterweight to fight Wonderboy Thompson. You know, you imagine if Wonderboy wins, that's a fight that's relevant to the title. The aforementioned Gunnar Nelson and Leon Edwards fight, Till and Masvidal as well. Ben Askren lingering around out there. There are a lot of very interesting puzzle pieces going on at welterweight, and add Capoeira Dos Santos to that chessboard. There's some very interesting things that we can see from any combination of these guys. Oh, and there, not to mention that the former champion who was dominant in his reign is still going to be lingering out there and still puts out just about anybody in this division. So I think there's a lot of very, very good things to come in that. So let's move on to Nico Price versus Tim Means. And you're talking about a lot of activity for one round. A lot of activity for less than a round. Let me get the official time on that stoppage. The official time, 4 minutes and 50 seconds. So 10 seconds shy of one round, and you had a ridiculous amount of activity from both guys. Like, man, talk about the chin on Nico Price, man, because Tim Means was not taking it easy on him at all. Tim Means was going at him furiously. He was landing shot after shot after shot after shot, and Price just took it and just kept delivering back. And it wasn't even that he was delivering punch for punch. It was more like Means would land like 3 and Price would land 1. And it's kind of kept going in that pattern. And conventional wisdom says, hey, the guy landing 3 is going to come out victorious in that affair. I mean, you saw his head snapping back. Like Price's head was snapping back very prominently every time a shot landed, especially leading up to that finishing sequence. Those combinations were just lighting up. His head was just rattling back over and over and over. Man, but how hard must Price hit to be able to land that one shot to end it all, man? That one shot. And I don't know if you guys caught this, but Means looked like he twisted his ankle on the way down. So like as he went limp, his ankle folded over underneath of him. So according to Twitter, he's been transported to the hospital to examine that. So hopefully that comes back without any real serious damage. Hate to see him suffer the same fate as Crow Cop did when he fought Gabriel Gonzaga, the way his knee blew out once he got knocked out and he just landed over top of himself. And it took a long time for Crow Cop to get anywhere near his level of athletic prowess that he had before that. And you could definitely make the case that he just was never the same after that, considering the level of competition that he's faced in recent years. So what to do now with Nico Price? I mean, this is also a guy who's outside of that top tier of names that we think about in his division. So you gotta start thinking about putting him in a fight, which is going to lead him to some sort of top 15 consideration, something that's gonna boost his profile. Because at this point, he's delivered some pretty memorable things. I mean, I know he's coming off of that loss to Al-Hassan at UFC 228, and that was a devastating loss, man. But you look at his work before that. The Randy Brown knockout is still something that I think we will be talking about for quite some time, man. That was a hell of a knockout. So you see what he's able to do when you put them in there, and crazy shit happens. So why not? Why not boost him up a little bit? Especially considering the guy that last put him away is kind of on hiatus due to his out of the cage issues. So yeah, like why not just kind of give him a little boost up, man, and see what he can do, potentially cracking the top 15. I think that he's another interesting piece to that puzzle. All right, so we've got Blagoy Ivanov and Ben Rothwell next. So that decision went to Ivanov or Ivanov. I think it's Ivanov. I think that's how it's pronounced. That decision went to Ivanov, 29-28. That was my scorecard, I think, or was that just my bias? I can't remember. But Ben Rothwell definitely didn't look bad in that fight at all. I mean, you definitely can make the case he won, but I don't think you really can get mad at the judges for this decision. That was a really, really close fight. That was an extremely close fight. It's a matter of what you favor scoring, because like the first round I definitely gave to Ivanov, but I'm not mad if you said it the other way. I gave it to Ivanov because he had more activity. It was just that simple. I don't equate just moving forward to good activity. It's just not the same. If you're just moving forward, but you're not throwing a lot of shots, you're not throwing a whole lot back, and the other guy, while he may be on his back foot, he's constantly throwing strikes. I got to give it to that guy. That guy's landing more. That guy's being more effective offensively while all you're doing is walking forward. Walking forward is just a small piece of the puzzle. Walking forward does not define octagon control. That does not define generalship of the fighting space. That's just a segment of it. When you're coming forward, you got to cut things off appropriately. And I think Rothwell started off cutting things appropriately. I think he was doing in those opening minute and a half, 2 minutes, something like that. He was doing a very good job, I think, of cutting the cage off, and it looked like Ivanov was panicked. Like he almost had this look of panic where he's just going back and forth and trying to move, trying to get some space, because Rothwell is a massive human being. Ivanov is not a small guy either, but Rothwell looked like a giant next to him. And imagine having a gentleman that size who was a trained killer, who was just consistently coming forward and able to cut off your movement. Yeah, you're gonna get on heightened alert at that moment. I think that's what Ivanov did. But by the second round, I think we saw less of that. Now. I think at that moment, Rothwell he made up for it in some way because he was throwing more. He was throwing more strikes, and I think I gave Rothwell the second round. I'd have to look again. Yeah, I did. But that was also another very close one. I gave it to him because he did throw more. While he was cutting off the cage less, he's moving forward, throwing more. And I think that negated moving around while throwing in defense. So that is kind of like just a little wrinkle in there in how you interpret the scoring criteria. The third round, though, I think was clearly Rothwell. So when I said my bias, I was just talking about how I didn't want Rothwell to cut a promo. I just really don't like his Dungeons and Dragons style of presentation for his promos for me, and very confused as to why the UFC was so eager to share this all over social media and big this up so much, because I just don't like it. But hey, to each his own. But getting mad at the judges on that one, the crowd booing so hard, I seen protest all over Twitter. Like, come on, knock it off, man. Just knock it off. Even off, you could definitely say won those first two rounds. But if you say that, then hey, if he loses the third, then that still means he won 2 rounds to 1. All right. So we can't simultaneously acknowledge how close a fight is by saying these rounds are swing rounds. These rounds are so close and it's hard to decide. It's hard to figure it out. And then get mad when it doesn't go the way we calculated. Like that just doesn't make sense. Those two things cannot coexist. So I think before we start throwing out robbery, before we start getting ready to crucify the judges in Wichita, Kansas. Let's keep in mind here, this was a very close fight we were dealing with. This was an extremely close fight. And if one guy is doing one thing slightly wrong, that could lose him the fight based on which set of eyes are looking at it. You know, and it's all, at the end of the day, it's all subjective anyway. So, but yeah, man, even off one of a very good fight, in my opinion, that was definitely one of the more entertaining ones for me. I mean, they both got busted the hell up, man. They both in there try to really give each other the business. So great work from both of those guys. Not exactly sure what comes next for them outside of, you know, the Derrick Lewis fight that I proposed earlier for either one of those guys. I mean, you put either one of them up against Derrick Lewis, I'm not mad. I think Evanoff could deserve, could use a boost in name value for his next opponent if he wants to make a run. Rothwell and Lewis would be a good pairing simply because if we're following the old, like, Joe Silva style of matchmaking, winner fights winner, loser fights loser, that one makes a lot of sense. And I think style-wise should be a very, very interesting one. But yeah, man, Rothwell, I picked against him simply because of his inactivity. You know, Rothwell hasn't fought for what, 2 or 3 years, something like that. And I, as a blanket rule, I will always pick the guy who is more active. If you sit out for more than a year and a half, I have a very, very difficult time picking you, unless, of course, there's this huge disparity in skill level. If Evanoff was just some bum off the street, then yeah, Rothwell's got it all day. But Evanoff was not. Like, he's a former World Series of Fighting champion. You know, this is a tough dude. UFC fans don't realize what he's capable of, considering that their introduction to him was losing to Junior Dos Santos. But Evanoff is legit, man. He's a real fighter. He's a real deal. And he's shown himself to be a very good striker, a very good defense. He's obviously got good movement. He's not the typical heavyweight on the way he moves and the way he fights. So yeah, it should be interesting to see what happens next with him. But he is, at the very least, an interesting puzzle piece for the heavyweight division. So it's moving on to Beneil Dariush versus Drew Dober, a fight that had lots of up and downs to it. That was a wild, wild fight. Dariush, of course, getting the triangle armbar in the second round. I believe, let's see what time. The official time on that one was 4 minutes, 41 seconds into the second round that Dariush was able to pull off that armbar. Man, this fight was very frustrating to watch at first for me because Dariush is a very, very dangerous grappler. He is an extremely dangerous grappler. We've seen him, wrap people up in pretzels several times before. Everybody that trains with him at King's MMA is just floored by the level of skill he shows on the ground. Yet Dariush has consistently found himself on the bad end of strikes, the past several years. Like just really bad mistakes that he's made and letting fights stay in the range that does not suit him very well. And that's exactly what was going on with Drew Dober at first. That's exactly what we saw to begin this fight. Dober was giving it to him, man. Dober was relentless and landing shots all over the place. And he just really didn't have an answer for it until he started in that second round, really trying to work his game and trying to slow it down and drag this to the floor and really make Dober work in areas that he isn't necessarily comfortable in. You're fighting a guy like Drew Dober with legs the size of a pickup truck. You don't want to stand out there and take kicks from him. You don't want to stand out there and just eat punches from him all day long. It's just not the way to go, especially when you have the grappling skills of a Beneil Dariush. So to see him get back on track with a game plan that made sense was definitely something good to witness there. And simultaneously, two things happen in this. So he gets a name value win. I mean, it's not Drew Dober isn't exactly a household name, but he's a guy who's been raising up his profile. He's a guy who has greatly improved in the past several years, and I think is a guy that we should be taking a little more seriously when his name gets called to fight someone else. He was able to handle the best that Dober had to offer, and then still make his game effective. It's hard to complain when you see that, although he took way too many shots in that process, if you ask me. Yeah, man. I once again am kind of curious what happens with both guys, because Drew Dober, I don't think you can drop him off too far from this. Drew Dober was a guy who, not in the distant past, man, we were not really taking him too seriously. We were not thinking of him as the real deal. But with coming into this with 3 wins in a row, yeah, time to take him seriously. And those 3 wins in a row followed by a loss, which showed him really dominant in the first round against a guy who skill-wise is a legit dude and better than him in a lot of ways, man. You got to give that some credit. So thumbs up to both gentlemen for that. All right, so question from Justin Bergamini. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Tell me if I'm pronouncing that right or not. He says, "What's next for JDS?" Hey, man, I don't mind going over this topic again. I'll go over this topic a million times over because I'm excited for what could be next for Junior Dos Santos. JDS, I say put him up against Francis Ngannou. I think that will settle some issues at heavyweight that were left unresolved when that original matchup was pulled. Style-wise, that makes for something really, really interesting. Oh, good. I did pronounce your name right. All right, sweet. Style-wise, that definitely gives us some entertainment. And I think it will show a lot about both guys. If Dos Santos being the much more polished striker who clearly still has a chin after eating some of the best that Derrick Lewis have to offer, who has improved his game technically. If he can go in there and give Ngannou a hard time, then I think we should slow our roll on the love affair with Francis Ngannou just yet, because he's still such a raw talent that might need a lot of development still. And JDS would be a very good litmus test for him. And also, if Dos Santos has trouble handling a Francis Ngannou, you got to think like, okay, where do we put JDS? Because this is a bigger guy with heavy hands who's matching him athletically. All right, what do we say about JDS next? Like, where does that put him? Because then you just got to wonder what he looks like in the title. Like, it just opens up all these doors that I'm so willing to walk down if you put them up against each other. I think that's the fight to make, and we definitely could. You definitely could pull some other rabbits out of the hat, but why not, man? Why not? Like I said before, I wouldn't be mad if Cormier saw him as well. But for my money, I want Ngannou for JDS. If Ngannou sneaks his way up to Kane, let's see who will be a good one for him. If he sneaks his way up to Kane, maybe we give him maybe give him Overeem again. Why not? With Volkov and Overeem are fighting, the winner of that. Yeah, I'm not mad at that. That wouldn't be bad at all. All right, where's my screen here? Here we go. All right, so Yo Jimbo, what up, Yo Jimbo? Says Ngannou and JDS would be really intriguing. Yeah, how could you ever complain about that fight? If you call yourself a fan of mixed martial arts and you don't want to see JDS versus Ngannou, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I don't know what to say to you. You clearly don't have good taste in your violence. All right. Yo Jimbo also says DC needs to retire Lesnar first. Yeah, you know what? We all really want to see that fight. We all want to see Daniel Cormier pick up Brock Lesnar and twirl him around like pizza dough and slam him on his head. I'm so there for that. But two problems with that. One, if we're trying to move toward, legitimate sporting integrity, Brock Lesnar has no business fighting anybody with a belt unless it's a WWE belt. That's the only thing he should be fighting for. The guy hasn't won. He hasn't won a legitimate fight since what? I don't even remember. Was Shane Carwin, I think, in 2010? I think that was 2010 that he beat Shane Carwin. Yeah, I mean, sorry. We want to see it for entertainment value, but then also there's like, does Brock sign up, man? Brock is not an active fighter. I know we keep talking about him, and he consistently plays the game by showing up cage side for certain events and gets everybody talking. He pits Dana White and Vince McMahon against each other. He does that all the time, and he's a master at it. But there's a certain point in time, man, where we just got to get the Brock Lesnar conversation out of here, man. Like, if you're not an active fighter, I have a hard time wanting to talk about you, but so much, when he shows that he's willing to fight and he signs a contract, or he is, actively pursuing that, hey, I'm all for it, Yeah, good point, Jimbo, that DC will put Lesnar out of our misery. Yeah, he will. He will. And it's like a guilty pleasure. For hardcore fight fans, that is a guilty pleasure. We want to see Brock Lesnar get thrown around and beat up by one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. It's that simple. And a guy who's really likable in Daniel Cormier. We love to see that fight. But if we're being fair to the fighters who are active and the fighters who actually want to fight, it's a conversation we should be talking about a lot less. I understand if you're Daniel Cormier wanting to hold out for that, because that's the easiest money you'll ever make. That is the easiest money out there for Daniel Cormier. So, yeah, pursue it, man. Pursue it. But for the rest of us who aren't getting that payday, who don't see pay-per-view points, who actually pay for those pay-per-view points, it's time we start having other conversations, Like, I just can't support the Brock Lesnar thing, but so much, as much as a part of me really wants to see it. I mean, I feel the same way about like the Diaz brothers. We talk about them all the time, but hey, until they fight, they just don't exist. They just can't, because the sport is moving on. If you're Nick Diaz and you haven't won a fight since like 2012 or something like that, I think this last win was BJ Penn. Like Jesus Christ, BJ Penn, who's retired like 3 times since then and come back 3 times since then. Like, he hasn't won since then. What are we talking about? You know what I'm saying? So that's just kind of my hang up on some of those conversations. But all right, so I mean, this card wasn't exactly action packed. We can, if anybody wants to talk about any fight in particular, just shoot me a comment in here and we'll get to it. But yeah, I'll run down. Let me just run down the results really fast so we can just kind of get that out of the way. And all right, so where do we leave off? Dariush and Drew Dover, yeah, submission, round 2, 4 minutes and 41 seconds. All right, Omari Akhmedov versus Tim Boetsch. That went to decision in favor of Omari. A very minimal activity fight. Very minimal activity, but I understand why Omari did what he did. That's, at this point, Tim Boetsch, like, it's amazing that this guy is still active. It's really amazing to me that he's still active. Like, his last win was against Johnny Hendricks, who was essentially the ghost of Johnny Hendricks in there at the on the Chiesa Lee card. Before that, losing to Jacare, getting a couple wins over Josh Saman and Rafael Natal, but really no sustained success for Tim Boetsch under the UFC banner since his initial run that started like with Kendall Grove up until Hector Lombard, when Hector Lombard was still relevant. And that was like 2010 to 2012 that we were talking about Tim Boetsch as like a relevant fighter. So the fact that he's out there still doing it, honestly, kind of fucking scares me, man. Like, but he still has that power. He still has that ability to brawl you and make your night tough. So if you're Amari Akhmedov, don't do it. Just don't do it. Just stay out of that range, and that's exactly what he did. Especially a guy who's been known to have like gas tank issues. The last thing you want to do is blow your wad against Tim Bowes, find yourself tired, and pushed up against the fence with him uppercutting you like he did to Yushin Okami. Like, hard pass on that, man. It's just not a good move. Another very, very low output fight was Anthony Rocco Martin and Sergio Moraes. Yeah, not really a lot to say about this. The right guy won the fight. Not a whole lot happened. And Rocco Martin didn't have to do much to win it. So, yeah, I mean, it was a minimal activity thing. And, yeah, whatever. Yana Kunitskaya and Marion Renault, Kunitskaya wins that by decision. I had it for Renault, but this is another time where I can't get mad about a decision being a little different than my scorecard. I can't get mad about that. So that second round is kind of where it's crucial. Kunitskaya clearly won the first round in my view. Renault came back toward the end of that second round. She started finding her range, applying the boxing. Then she started busting up Kunitskaya's face, and that nose was, Jesus, man, that nose was all over the place. Like I tweeted out, man, looked like she was sniffing her shoulder. That shit was wild crooked and bloodied up. So, but Renault just kept finding that target. Excuse me. Once that door was open, it never shut. In that third round, man, she just hammered Kunitskaya, and she just stayed exactly in that sweet spot of range where Kunitskaya couldn't really get off the best kick without exposing her head for a punch. You know, and that was crucial. Like Marion Renault is like 41, I think, years old, and giving it to him. Still an elite fighter. You know, Kunitskaya, like, her UFC run has not been, you know, crazy electric necessarily. I mean, she had the win over Lena Landsberg at UFC 229. And of course, her debut against Cyborg was a total unmitigated disaster. But before that, she was Invicta champion. And I was at the fight where she won that belt. Not the disputed result when she had the submission over Tanya Evinger that got overturned. When she beat Raquel Paulalouis. I was at that fight, man, and that was one of the most underrated title performances of that year of 2017. That was such an underrated performance, man. She controlled so much of that fight, and then, like, Kunitskaya is a very legit fighter. She's very good, and just her best performances have been behind the Invicta banner. Therefore, you know, mainstream people just don't realize what she's capable of. So to outbox her, for Renault to be able to close that distance and handle things the way she did, man, that was pretty serious, man. And she definitely, you know, it sucks for her to get this loss in such a closely contested fight. I mean, this is now 2 in a row for her, with her last loss being against Kat Zingano. But like before that, man, she was on a roll. She had like a 4-fight unbeaten streak with only a draw to Betch Kohea being in any form of dispute. Her other wins, like Sarah McMahon choking her out in the distance, dope, man. She had a TKO on Talita Bernardo as well. So she's had some very good performances, but it's like one of those other cases, man. When Marion Renault fights a good fighter, like she has these good performances, but just doesn't seem to get the win in a lot of cases. Like, I'm reminded of that Holly Holm fight where she performed well, but it just wasn't good enough. It just was kind of out of what was necessary to win it. So it sucks for her, but I hope this loss doesn't throw her too far out of the mix, because that was a very good performance. And in my opinion, she should have been the rightful winner. All right, so moving on from that, Grant Dawson versus Julian Erosa. Julian Erosa loses a decision to Dawson, and I think that was it was a fair decision. I mean, that was a pretty odd fight, man. It was a pretty odd fight. Like I scored that one for Dawson. I saw some protests, a few protests online about it, but Dawson Dawson was able to control more of that fight. Like he was able to get wrestling control and slow it down when he needed to slow it down. It turned into a brawl a few times, but he was always able to just go back to clinching, go back to grabbing him, go back to holding him, and just keeping it at the pace he wanted when he wanted it. You know, the only round that I scored against Erosa was that second. I mean, I scored for Erosa was that second round, and if you scored that one for Dawson, I'm not mad. But I had to score it for Erosa simply because he was able to drop Dawson with 3 leg kicks. Like he dropped him 3 times with leg kicks, and it was hard for me to, despite the success that that Dawson had at other points in the round, it was hard for me to look past that when I put my 10-9 on my sheet of paper that I'm looking at right now. So, yeah, but Erosa, man, was able to put in some good work with those calf kicks. It was good stuff, man. Yeah, it is what it is on that one. So the sneaky good fight on this card for me was Maurice Green versus Jeff Hughes. This was another one that that seemed to raise the ire of the people in attendance. Maurice Green winning a decision in that one, and I think that was the right call. But barely, man, just barely. Maurice Green was so close to just gassing himself out completely in that fight that I didn't really know if he could last. I mean, that first round started off with him maintaining distance for the most part, using those teeps, using his jab very effectively. He didn't jab necessarily to hurt him. It wasn't like he was jabbing to set up power shots, which I would have liked to see a little more of that. But he was doing that to keep the distance and maintain his pace under the control that he wanted. However, his gas tank just didn't last, man. You know, once his gas tank started going, Hughes was able to get in there, close some distance, and really get in his face and give him some trouble from time to time. But still, it just seemed like it was too little too late, because there was still enough times that that Green was able to create that distance and keep it there just long enough to land a few shots. Then Hughes would close it in, and they would kind of rinse and repeat over and over again. Except for that one sequence when Hughes landed that body shot, and Green was definitely hurt, and he stumbled back to the cage. You know, I just thought that Hughes lost a big opportunity there, man, because you hurt a guy to the body. I mean, we saw this in the main event. You hurt a guy to the body, and so many other things open up. The shots to the head open up. Repeated body shots open up. Like they slow down. They turtle up. They're like, you're much more likely to land fight-ending offense when you hurt a guy to the body. So to get that body shot and to see the pain on Green's face as he stepped back and leaned against the fence, and definitely leaning against the fence where you can't move but so much and your stance is affected, to see him there and then Hughes elect to clinch him, it just didn't seem like the wisest use of that opportunity. You know, and I know he wasn't, you know, he was very careful not to stay on the outside, you know, and eat a shot coming in or whatever. That makes sense. But still, man, you got a guy hurt, and he's that hurt, and to the point where it's so clear on his face and his movement is affected. It seems like that's the time to capitalize. Like, you don't necessarily have to stay all the way to the outside. You can close distance while striking. And I think that's a golden opportunity that he missed. And then you saw once Green recovered, you know, he was able to land that hard jab, drop him, and he kind of reestablished himself in that fight. And then, you know, he hung on in that third round despite being gassed. And I had Hughes winning. I had Green winning that last round, but just barely, man. He was hanging on by a thread, and it was just enough of a thread to get the win. So there's that. Louis Smoker and Matt Schnell. Smoker goes down to a first round triangle choke at 3 minutes and 18 seconds. I'm really not sure what to say about that. I like the way that Matt was like chain submission attempting. He had the guillotine. He switched out into the triangle, and he just kept up just giving him something to defend. And Smolka just didn't really have the time to, he didn't have the opportunity to really just break the position and get to safety. It was like you defend one thing and then, oh shit, here's the next. And you defend that and oh shit, there's the next. And that chain submission, I just wish we saw more of that in the UFC, because that's just pretty fire, man, to witness that. I love to see the chain submissions at work. All right, so Alex Morono with a verbal submission due to elbows on Zach Otto in the first round, 3 minutes and 34 seconds into that. And Alex White gets a decision win over Dan Moret. Both of those were decent enough fights. Yeah, but not. I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. I guess Alex Morono, I like the versatility and what he did tonight. That he was able to switch between disciplines, man. That he was able to land some Taekwondo style kicks. He was able to stay in the pocket. He was able to handle things on the ground. I mean, that was a true mixed martial artist performance right there. And Alex White, I like what Alex White did as far as just staying busy in that fight. Like that was probably the most entertaining a grinding fight can get, if you ask me. Like that was a fight that really had a lot of slow moments, but it still delivered action-wise to me somehow. It's just an interesting balance on that. Yeah, man. But anyway, so I will be, unless anybody's got any more questions or anything, I guess I'll just run down some final thoughts. Feel free to interrupt me if you've got any bright ideas on what more topics can be, if you want to talk more about Derrick Lewis and JDS. So to wrap things up, man, Derrick Lewis versus JDS is definitely one of those good fights that was just strange, man. That was just such an MMA fight, you know, in the worst and the best sense of that word. What an interesting contest right there, man. I like that. I like the technical improvements in both men. I like the fact that Lewis looked like he was in much better shape. I like the fact that JDS is still that man. He's still legit. He's still got a chin. He's kind of like restored himself. He resurrected his career, man, and that's dope to see. Like two guys that I do have a lot of respect for and I enjoy quite a lot. So this has been the Walk of Shame on the Walkout Network. So as far as where you can find me, check out my Twitter. That's at Ant Walker MMA. That's at Ant Walker MMA. So coming up on Sherdog.com, I've got the Good, Bad, and the Ugly, my regular post-fight column. That will be available tomorrow. I'll write that as soon as I get back from the movies. So I'm about to see Captain Marvel. And then Ask Ant, my weekly mailbag column, that dropped today. So check that out. Answer some questions about the future for Johnny Walker, BJ Penn's return, and whiskey. Actually, I think that was the last question that I answered. So another Ask Ant will be coming next week. Of course, there will be another episode of The Trenches with the homie Jason Burgos of Sherdog.com as well. You can find that on the Sherdog.com YouTube page. You can find that on the main page as well. So what else I got coming up? Yeah, MMA On Point. I'm a writer for them as well. And I've got a video that just dropped about the 10 worst referees. So check that out on MMA On Point's YouTube channel. So because I got to put on a fresh Marvel shirt and get myself ready to see some MCU action, I'm going to finish this whiskey and I'm going to call it a night here for the Walkout Network. So you know what you got to do. You got to stay beautiful. You got to stay positive. You got to stay incredible. You got to stay ready for anything that goes down out here in this crazy ass world. And most of all, through it all, you must stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace.